Good morning, YouTube, and welcome back to the channel. This is iMac Sports with another football video, and today I'm going over who I believe the rushing leader of the 2020 NFL season will be. So this is based purely off of rushing yards, not based off of total scrimmage yards, because one of my lower choices will have more scrimmage yards than the majority of the other people on the list. So it's based off of purely rushing yards. Last year, the rushing leader was Derrick Henry with 1,540 rushing yards. So without further ado, let's get right into. For every slide, I'm going to display the players' previous season statistics as well as my projections for this year. But I'm mainly going to be focusing on their rushing yards, and I'm going to explain how I arrived at that number. So for Christian McCaffrey, I have him having 1,325 rushing yards in this season coming up. And that's because I expect him to stay around the same level of play he was at last year. But I don't think that he's going to exceed last season. And I don't think he's going to regress too much. So I have Christian McCaffrey at number 5 because I think that there are a lot of amazing running backs in the league. And I know that not every running back is going to get 1,400 yards. And there usually aren't this many running backs that do this well with purely rushing yards. But I think that this year is going to be different. I think there's going to be a lot of players this year that have a lot of yards, and it's going to be a rushing season. There's going to be so many teams with really amazing ground games, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So with Christian McCaffrey, he was the top running back in the league last year. He had almost 2,400 scrimmage yards. I think next year you can't expect any player to stay at the top of their game. So if someone has 2,400 scrimmage yards one year, they're not going to have 2,400 scrimmage yards the next season. That never happens. So I think he's going to go down. I have him having 2,200 next year, but he might even go lower than that because because 2,200 scrimmage yards is still absolutely incredible. And it would be I'm not even sure, top 20 of all time, I believe, maybe, scrimmage yards in a season. So I think that Christian McCaffrey will still have an amazing season, but considering he catches the ball so many times, he had 142 targets last year. I just don't see him getting as many carries as he had last year, never mind more. And if his average yards per attempt goes even up a little bit, then I don't think that he'll have as many yards as he did last year. I also think that since he's coming down since his yards total will be going down, since he's still catching a lot of balls, I think that his rushing yards are going to be hurt more. I think that he might even be sent into the 1,200s for rushing yards, especially if he keeps up with the amount of receptions that he's getting. So it'll be interesting to watch, and I hope he has a good season, but I don't think he'll have the rushing leader title. Next I have Kenyan Drake in 4th. And Kenyan Drake entered Arizona halfway through the season. In those 8 games, he had 123 carries for 643 yards and 8 touchdowns, 5.2 yards per attempt, 80.4 yards per game, 35 targets, 28 receptions, and 171 receiving yards. And I think that next year he's going to continue to have as many yards per game as last year, but add some. I think that in his 16 games, he'll have 290 carries for 1,400 yards. Yep, this is the first player I believe will have 1,400 yards in the season. I think that he'll have 13 touchdowns on the ground, more than Christian McCaffrey, and he'll have a decent number of receptions and a lot of receiving yards, because he had a lot of receiving yards in the short time he was in Arizona last year. Now he doesn't have the competition of David Johnson, and he is the sole first-string running back in Arizona. He also has Kyler Murray at quarterback, who likes to throw the ball. I think he will be hurt rushing-wise because Kyler Murray will take off on occasion. So he might not have 1,400, but I really love Kenyan Drake, and I'm being a little optimistic about his statistics, I believe. But I do think he'll have a great season whether or not he gets the rushing title. Next on our list is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is coming in third. And the reason why I have Josh Jacobs in third is because of how incredible his season last year actually was. So in 13 games, he had 1,150 yards, which is 86.7 yards per game, or about 1,400 yards in a 16-game season, similar to what I expect Kenyan Drake to have this year. And I don't think that he's going to go down. I think he's going to continue to go up. He had 166 receiving yards as well, and he said that he wants to have 60 receptions this year. I don't see that happening. I think he's going to have more carries, and he will have more receptions than he did last year, but he won't have 60 receptions next year. He might have 60 targets, but he won't have 60 receptions. So I have him projected to have 1,500 yards on 320 carries, 9 touchdowns, 4.7 yards per attempt, and 94 yards per game. I think he's going to have an amazing season, and he's going to build off of last year's possibly 1,400 yards, and I think he could have potentially up to 1,500 yards this season, almost 100 more than Kenyan Drake. Now, my last two players, I think, are clearly the top two choices for NFL rushing leader, and so usually I do the best of the rest at the right before the first player, but I'm going to do it right before the second player because I think that it makes much better sense in the situation, because number 1 and number 2 are so much farther ahead than the rest of the league for rushing yards per game, I'm going to believe, for this upcoming year. So in the best of the rest, first we have Chris Carson. I think that Chris Carson will have around 1,300 yards and 350 receiving yards. He had 1,230 last year in 15 games, and I think that he'll have more this year. He'll have more receiving yards because I think that Russell's going to throw the ball more times than he did last year. And I think the Seahawks are going to have a really good season, and that's going to help Chris Carson boost his rushing yards even more. He might even have more than Christian McCaffrey, depending on how Christian McCaffrey's workload is split up between rushes and receptions. But I think that no matter what, Chris Carson will have around 1,300 yards. I have Nick Chubb just below Chris Carson because I think that Nick Chubb could also have taken the number 5 spot on this list. I think that he had an incredible season last year. But I think that Baker Mayfield is going to throw the ball more this year than they did last year. I think that they're going to change up their game plan because last year apparently didn't work. He threw more passes per game in 2018 than they did in 2019, and the Browns did better. I know that Baker turned the ball over a lot last year, but I think that they're going to fix that. They're going to learn from it, and Baker's going to have a much better season this year. I'm sorry for the little thing of light here. That's just the way that my thing is set up for today. But it's also early in the morning, so the sun is coming straight in through the window, so you can see the reflection in the window. I'm really bad at pointing in a camera. Then we have Saquon Barkley, who I believe is going to have around 1,250 yards. There's not a lot of spacing between these running backs, because I think that once you get down to 1,300 yards, you're going to see a lot more players having 1,200 yards. And I think that that's because there are a lot of really good running backs in the league right now. Dalvin Cook and Saquon Barkley are really impressive running backs. Dalvin Cook had 1,150 last year in 14 games. I think that he'll have a couple fewer yards per game and a little bit more total yards. And I think that Saquon Barkley is going to have the same amount of yards per game as he did last year. But he's going to play all 16 games instead of 13 or however many. I think he played 13 games last year and had about 1,000 yards. So this year he'll play all 16 games. He'll have around 1,250. I think he'll have 650 receiving yards because that's about his norm when he plays a full 16 games. And I think that all these players are very impressive in their own respects. And I hope that they all do very well for themselves. But I don't think any of them will be the rushing leader in 2020. And now we move on to my number 2 selection. This player has been in the conversation for rushing leader almost every year of his career, and he has had the most rushing yards per game 3 of the 4 seasons he's been in the league. One of those years he only played 10 games, so he wasn't really in the conversation, but he's been rushing leader twice, he's been yards per game leader 3 times, he's played in the league 4 years. It's Ezekiel Elliott. And Ezekiel Elliott is a clear choice for most rushing yards in the league because that's what his career has been. He's had 3 seasons in his 4 years as a professional with the most rushing yards per game. Most of those seasons being 98, 99, and 107 yards per game or something around there. And last year was a big dip down to 84. I think that he's going to bounce back. He's going to bounce back better. I think that he's going to have a really great season. And I think that Dak Prescott is going to throw the ball a couple less times. Because last year when he balled out and threw so many passes that his arm fell off, they didn't do so well. I think the Cowboys need to step back, take a look at their game plan. Dak can't throw that many passes because that's not what works for them. The seasons that they did the best was when they just let Ezekiel Elliott run the ball out, and Dak would throw it when they needed to. And that worked really well for them, and they need to change back to that, and I think that they will after seeing what happened with last season and how their full passing 100% of the time, go offense didn't work. I think that he'll have 330 rushes for 1,625 yards, 4.9 yards per attempt, and 13 touchdowns. I think that he'll have around 400 receiving yards as well, putting him over 2,000 yards, which I think that he has averaged over 2,000 yards in a 16-game season every single year of his career. I don't think that, adjusted to a 16-game season, I don't think he's ever had below what would be 2,000 yards, which is, I believe about 250 yards per game. But I'm not 100% sure. 125 total scrimmage yards per game. I don't know where I got it. 250 still. I think that he will have 125 scrimmage yards per game because that is his career average except for last year. His first 2 seasons he had over 130. Last year he had around 100. So last year was a little dip down, but I think that he'll bounce back next year and he'll have a shot at the rushing title. But we're neglecting one person. And this one person had 1,125 rushing yards in 9 games last year. Yes, the last 9 games of the season, he had 1,125 yards. That's good for a running back an entire season. So without further ado, I present your rushing leader for 2019, and I am sorry for 2020, and I am so sorry that I didn't put him on my NFL MVP list because I think that he should be on I think that he should replace Christian McCaffrey on my NFL MVP prediction list. So the link to that will be above, and I'm sorry I didn't put him on there and that I overlooked his abilities earlier on this year. But without further ado, my rushing leader, Derrick Henry. Yes, Derrick Henry is my rushing leader for the 2020 NFL season. He had 190 carries for 1,125 yards since Tannehill joined the Titans. So that's what I did because he didn't have a great season before Tannehill joined the Titans. In 8 games, he had 415 rushing yards, which is not bad, but it's nowhere near having 1,125 in 9 games. And I think that there's something to be said there. And I think that and I know that Ryan Tannehill isn't the person that made Derrick Henry do so well. But the fact that Derrick Henry didn't have Marcus Mariota running all over the field, and he had a quarterback that was competent enough to get them down the field and keep the ball, it made it easy for Derrick Henry to rack up those yards, rack up those points, and do really well for himself. He had 125 yards per game, which, as I said earlier, was the threshold for 2,000 total yards. So in a season, So he was averaging 2,000 yards for the season, and I think that he will have around 1,900 yards, and it'll be a really impressive showing. I think that he could have up to 19 touchdowns, which would also be possibly bring him closer to getting that MVP position. And depending on how the quarterbacks do, he really could have a chance. I think that he is the lifeblood of that team, and he could easily have 2,000 rushing yards and receiving yards on top of that. And so Derrick Henry is by far, it's not even close. Derrick Henry is my choice for the rushing leader next year. I know he had it this year, and it's a cheap way to get out of predicting who's going to have it, but I think that there's not even a chance that anyone else comes even anywhere near Derrick Henry's stats next year. I think the 1,890 yards is a very impressive feat, and I think that he could have that, if not more. So I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a comment below who you think the rushing leader for the 2020 season will be, or any video ideas that you wish that I will do. I'll look at them, I'll decide whether or not I'll do them, and I'll get back to you at some point in time. So thank you again for watching the video. Please like the video, it really does help. Subscribe if you're new, and I really do think that it's, I do appreciate all of the support I've been getting. Hashtag road to 30 subscribers. My channel is very small right now, as you can all tell. So 30 subscribers would mean a whole lot to me if we could get to that this week. Make sure to tell your friends about the channel, because I do appreciate making these videos, and I think that my audience has enjoyed them so far as well. So thank you guys all for watching the video. I love you all, and stay safe. Coronavirus. Peace out.